dropping Indians, the name that the organization has gone by since 1915. And this follows a similar move by the Washington football team in July and comes after decades of protests by the Native American community. I spoke with Crystal Echo Hawk, founder of Illuminative, right around the time companies began pressuring Washington's team to drop its name. Her nonprofit aims to challenge the negative narratives about Native peoples in American society.
It's important for people to understand that this has been a movement that Native leaders have been pushing for nearly 30 years. That really began with people like Suzanne Harjo and others. I mean, this has gone all the way to the Supreme Court. Native leaders, Native Americans across the country have been calling for the end to all sports mascots, to the Washington to change its name, to change its racist logo. And we've been silenced and erased for years. And there's been calls over the years on these corporations. So we are really excited to have all of these investors, really help to apply the pressure in the moment and to see the companies answering the call.
She made clear that other names, including Cleveland and Atlanta's baseball teams, are also just as offensive. So let's get more on what's next for Cleveland's club and bring in Zach Meisel. He is a Cleveland-based reporter of The Athletic. Zach, Cleveland got rid of its mascot, Chief Wahoo, about 2 years ago. Was the team thinking that that would be enough to silence the critics, or was it always seen as inevitable that they would drop the name as well?
Yeah, I think internally there was some hope that that would be the end of the discord, I guess you could say. But I think they knew there was going to continue to be some pressure, and it really ramped up this year. I mean, I think what happened with the Washington football team really opened some eyes in the organization and made them realize that this wasn't going away. And just because you got rid of the logo, a lot of people still had a bone to pick with the team name. And so when the Washington situation happened the way it did, it wasn't long after that Cleveland's executives decided they need to have a review of their team name. And once they publicized that, it seemed inevitable that this day would come.
Now, when we talk about what happened with Washington, it wasn't until companies threatened to pull their support and their spending that the football team moved to drop its name. For instance, FedEx has naming rights to the stadium, and they said they would pull out. Nike said it stopped selling uniforms on its website. Did we ever get to a point where companies delivered an ultimatum to the Cleveland team?
No, and I think that's I think ownership and the front office in Cleveland take a little bit of pride in that they got out in front of it maybe. And, they said that they want to be forward thinking with all of this. And it's admirable. I mean, the reality is that this has been an ongoing conversation in this city for decades. It's not like no one had ever thought of this before and this just happened to pop up in 2020. But I think a lot of what has happened this year across the country fed into this. And it was just kind of an epiphany that happened in the front office, and they realized it's something that they wanted to do.
Now, changing a team's name is actually a long and involved process that can take up to 2 years. And in fact, the Cleveland team says it'll keep the Indians' name in uniforms for the 2021 season. Who bears the cost of all of this? Is it always the team, or does the league get involved as well?
Yeah, I think it's the team. There are a lot of different things with trademarking and rebranding. And I mean, think about all the signage. You've had Indians logos and insignia around the city and the ballpark for, this was a charter member of the American League. They've had this name since 1915. So there's a lot to be done, and cost plays a big role in it. When the Indians decided to drop their Chief Wahoo logo 2 years ago, they kept it on the uniforms for another season, and it was almost like a retirement tour. And so they, certainly expected a bump in some purchasing of the merchandise after that announcement, and at least it gave them some time to figure out the financial situation and how they were going to rebrand things and pay for what needs to be paid for and whatnot. And it's a similar situation here where they're not putting a timeline on this. They're going to keep the current name until they have a new name picked out.
Right.
And it at least buys them some flexibility.
There's also other teams with names that are deemed offensive: Atlanta Braves, Chicago Blackhawks, the Kansas City Chiefs. And of course, it's not just at the professional level as well, but also at the youth sports level. I'm sure there's a bunch of little league teams that are also named the Indians throughout the Cleveland area. What kind of discussion is there, do you think there is, to address it at the lower level, at the youth level?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think a lot of times you look to those wide-reaching audience, the teams that have the wide-reaching audiences to maybe set the example, and then you go after that. It's interesting when the Indians announced they were going to review their name back in July, the Braves came out and said, we're sticking with ours. We don't see any issue with it. So I think there are different conversations happening all over the place, but it'll be fascinating to see now that you do have a team here deciding to do this. And this is obviously the second major example with Washington being the first in terms of pro sports. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there is a trickle-down effect. And you hear the Indians talk about how they consulted with all sorts of people from different groups, civic leaders, fans, season ticket holders, other employees, Native American members of Native American groups. So, yeah, I think one thing that Cleveland owner Paul Dolan said was, look, I'm a fifth-generation Clevelander. I grew up loving the Indians and the team name and the connection to the memories that I had. And it was tough for me, too. And he said, I hope that other people who might be against this can at least do what I did and listen and learn to other people from various groups, and then maybe you have a better understanding. And so maybe that's what we see, at a lower level in the communities and those situations where you have a similar thing to tackle.
Zach, fantastic to get your take. Zach Meisel joining us from Cleveland. He is with The Athletic.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quicktake now for insight in an instant.